Hi, and welcome to the 12th House Podcast, where we talk about making the unseen seen. I'm Michelle Pelizon, the founder and head witch in charge at Holisticism, and I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome. In today's episode, I'm talking with Wallis, our content editor, about archetypes. Archetypes are something that definitely Team Holisticism knows really well at this point, but they are a key component in our business and what we do, and also how we approach intuitive business. But archetypes and understanding archetypal journeys and the different archetypal personas is something that we definitely teach our students or anyone who's in our North Node community or anyone who's ever taken a class with me. I talk about the archetypes a lot. I think that they're just such a cool vocabulary for us to understand or to have in our back pocket to describe ourselves and the people around us and also the people that we serve so that we can know all of the above, ourselves, people we serve, the people around us, so we can know each other better and so we can have real empathy for each other. I also love the archetypes because they help us picture ourselves as multidimensional people. Not that we don't necessarily, but so often we can sort of be painted into a certain light or painted into a certain persona. Maybe you're the responsible one in your family, or maybe you're the creative one, or maybe you're the rebel, or maybe you're the hard worker. And while that might be true, you might resonate with one of those identities. You probably hold a lot of other identities because you're a multidimensional human being, right? And archetypes, I find, especially when we cast our archetype chart, which we'll talk about in this episode, help us really acknowledge all those dimensional aspects of ourselves that sometimes are in conflict with each other, that sometimes seem contradictory. Because guess what? We can be complex. We are complex creatures. And the archetypes remind us that that's okay and that's normal. And they give us more empathy for ourselves. And I think they give us more empathy for the people around us. So I'm really excited for you to hear more about the archetypes. They're one of my favorite things to talk about, if you couldn't tell from the length of this episode. And I want to dive deeper on them. If you have questions about the archetypes, or you have a very clear idea of what you want to learn more about, shoot me a text at the number in the show notes. And I want to hear from you. I want to know what your thoughts are. And really, I want to know what you want to know about archetypes so that I can deliver that content to you. Because, you know, I love to serve. No big deal. But really, I do have the teacher archetype in my chart. So I love to teach, and I love to teach to students who know what they want. So shoot me a note. Okay, without further ado, here's the episode about archetypes with yours truly and Wallis. Hi, Wallis.
What's up? What's up?
Your Zoom background right now is outer space.
That's the vibe. I'm out here. We're out here. Who knows where we're headed? We don't know.
Nobody knows. We're recording this before the U.S. election. So we really are
the eve.
Who
election
knows?
eve.
Yeah, really. It's election eve. There's a little bit of anxiety in the air. But hopefully by the time this podcast goes live, all will be well.
Yes, fingers crossed. And I'd like, the constant perspiration that I have going on to just dissipate a little bit.
The never-ending anxiety sweat.
Yeah. Just a fine dew.
That a Sheen natural deodorant definitely doesn't help with anxiety sweat. Like regular deodorant kind of doesn't help with anxiety sweat, but like I feel like natural deodorant really cannot stand up to it. Great. Now that we've addressed that we're both sweating, what's up with Holisticism this week before we dive into this podcast episode?
What is happening this week? We're kicking off a new month in the North Node, which is fun.
I think we've addressed it already in the podcast. Like this quarter for us as a team is like kind of just a fun quarter because we did all of our hard work already earlier in the year. So we kind of just like get to fuck off and do whatever we want, which is awesome. So lots of experiments, but in the North Node, we got new content, like you said, in our private members community. We have a quiz that's live today, all about archetypes that we had a lot of fun making. And I'm teaching a class this week on Saturday with Xenia from the Conscious Social Media Method. And I'm really stoked about it because it's very transparent. It's called Saturday School. And we're like, we're just pulling back the curtain on like everything that's happened in both of our businesses in 2020, because I think that that's really important. And we're going to talk about the things that worked really well, the things that were like major fails and that were not fun. But I don't know. That's like something that I wish the businesses that I looked up to when I was first getting started did, because I feel like there are so many untruths like out there on the internet where people can look like we were just talking about this, like, you know, TikTok stars that look like they're doing amazing. And then you look, you know, behind the scenes of their business and like, it's not actually as pulled together as you would think. Same thing with Instagram. You see it all the time. And so Sandy and I kind of just wanted to like pull back the curtain and be like, here are our numbers. Here's like the deal. And hopefully people can learn from it. So it's a 3-hour class where first hour together is just like both of us going over our fails and also our wins. Second class is me just teaching about the Akashic records and intuition and creativity. And then Seni is teaching a class after that on 5D social media. She's just so herself and she's so weird, like, and amazing. And I really admire her for that. Yo, Instagram does not spark joy for me.
I think her process is really interesting in her workshop in the North Node that she did, talking about the way she intuitively posts. And I very much resonate with that style. Not that I'm posting on Instagram for business at all right now, but I think it's interesting to think about. I'll go off for 2 weeks, not really post anything, and then I'll show up and all week I'll just post stories, I'll post photos, whatever, and I'll just go with it. And then I'll spend another 2 weeks not interested in going on at all. And that's the only way it works for me. I can't schedule stuff and resonate with what goes out. So it was kind of affirming to hear that process. And she advocates for all different ways of going about it. And I respect that. But it was interesting to hear another person talk about that way of approaching her posting cycle.
Totally. Yeah, the way that she talks about social media is very freeing. And it's like, you know, here are the rules and like kind of here's how the algorithm works. But like the most important thing is that you're using it and that you like it, because your energy is something that people can feel from across the screen. And I think that that's right. I mean, that's kind of how I think we use Instagram at Holisticism. You know, we've got our content so clearly planned, but from when it comes to the podcast or to the blog or to our emails, but Instagram is kind of like the, you know, redheaded stepchild of our business, where we're like, just like put whatever up there that feels good. We definitely don't plan it out. And that's worked really, I mean, moderately well for us. But again, like I kind of don't like Instagram. So maybe I'm a bit apathetic to it.
Well, it's not the only way.
It's true. It doesn't have to be the only way. We're a bright shining beacon, hopefully, that like you don't have to be on social media in order to have an amazing business that you love, and like an intuitive business. There's so many other ways to connect with
That's
people.
What they want you to think. They want you to think you need that 10K for the swipe up.
It's all part of Zuckerberg's master plan. He wants us to think that he rules the world, but he doesn't. No. He doesn't.
Don't believe the hype.
So anyways, in this class, you'll kind of get a little bit of both. You'll get a little bit of like why social media is amazing. And then I'll come in and be like, also, if you don't want to use social media, here's how we do it. And then Seni and I will do a Q&A together. But the coolest thing, I don't know if I told you this, Wallis, but anyone who buys a ticket gets a free ticket. So you can like bring anyone that you want. So it's really affordable. Yeah, you can either like split the cost with a friend, or you can just gift it to someone. Or like, I don't know, I think this is a cool opportunity to maybe meet someone that you've been afraid to approach and be like, hey, I'm going to this class. Do you want my free ticket? And like, do you want to be my +1? And like facilitate a relationship or connection. I don't know. That's like my dream.
That's really cute.
It's a meet cute.
I like that. We can't go to this in-person rave that we were going to go to. So we might as well link up and rave on the internet and learn something cool together.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, you know, have a little accountability buddy or someone who's like into the same intuitive business stuff that you're into. And like, I think it's a cool way to maybe open a portal, which is the name of the class. It's called Portals, like to a new friendship or new relationship. So if anyone's out there and you end up coming to class. I can't wait to see you and teach you, but also like, let me know if you invite someone who's a stranger and like how that goes for you. Okay, great. That's our update for Holisticism. All good things. You can follow Holisticism on Instagram at Holisticism, and stay tuned on the podcast for more business news. And you can always text us your questions or ideas, or if you want feedback on your own intuitive business stuff, text the number in our show notes and I reply. We reply. So we'd love to hear from you. Okay. And with that, let's hop into the episode. Okay, so today we're talking about archetypes, which are one of my favorite things to talk about. Like, I've taught this class many times and I really enjoy teaching it every single time because archetypes are fucking cool, especially if you're a nerd, especially if you like love mythology and stories and film and people. You're going to love archetypes, even if you don't know it yet. And you're probably more fluent in the language of archetypes than you realize because they are something that we share as human beings, like in our collective unconscious. But there are a lot of ways that we use archetypes in the world, like in popular culture, I would say. Wallis, you brought up that you know archetypes mostly from like business, as people like create an archetype for their or persona for their ideal client.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a useful way to kind of narrow in on who you want to talk to, looking at different audiences and figure out, you can't speak to everyone. If you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to no one. So finding your ideal community and client, I feel like using archetypes is a really good way to narrow down, figuring out what you do want and what you don't want to be creating, whether that's in your brand identity or just in your overall messaging and who you're reaching out to within your community.
Yeah, I feel like at every startup I've worked at, we've had like, this is the archetype of who our ideal client is. So archetypes are used often in like from the business perspective as a way to create an ideal client, because archetypes, like I said, are universal language that we all can kind of relate to. So if we say like the archetype of a mother or someone's a mother, you have imagery that pops into your head or information that you already kind of know about that person, right? If we call someone maternal or motherly, then we know that they're probably pretty warm. We know that they're probably a caregiver. We think that they're probably a female identifying person, right? And that tells us information about them. On the flip side, if we give someone the archetype of like a single person, they're going to have a really different persona than like what the mother would potentially be for your business. So you're looking at two really different clients. But I think that archetypes are like way cooler and way sexier than the way that startups make them out to be for ideal client archetypes, because we can actually use them kind of the same way that we use astrology or human design. We can use them as a way to understand ourselves and the aspects of ourselves that we are not maybe so in awareness of. But I'm bearing the lead a little bit. I want to get into just what the word archetype means and where it comes from. So archetypes are innate to humanity. They are in our myths, they're in our spirituality, in art, in our stories. There are icons and there are heroes. If you look at the people that we look up to, like Obama or Oprah or Beyonce, you could say that all of those people who are
Kings
like,
and queens.
pop culture. Exactly. Yeah. Like the sovereign, right, is Barack Obama. The queen or the empress could be Beyonce. Oprah, like the visionary, right? This is archetypal language that we use to describe these people and who our heroes are. Even the idea of a hero is an archetypal word, right? Or an archetypal person. So the word archetype is an original model after which other similar things have been patterned. And this word and the way that we're going to be talking about it today was really created or brought into popular culture by Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychotherapists, because, we have so many. And he had this belief that, if you don't know who Carl Jung is, I'd say do a Google deep dive, because a lot of the actual like work around shadow stuff and spirituality that comes up in wellness culture today in 2020, 2021 is actually deeply rooted in Carl Jung's work, which is really fascinating. So if you have done any shadow work, that actually originated with Carl Jung, and Jungian analysts are some of the best teachers on shadow work because they know it so well. But the archetype and how we use it and how we're going to talk about it in this podcast was created, the idea of it was really perfected by Carl Jung. And he said that archetypes are the images and the patterns and the symbols that rise out of the collective unconscious that we all have together. And they appear in things like our dreams, our individual dreams and our collective dreams, our mythology, our fairy tales, and our religion. Basically, we've got, as humans, this language that we all share. And that's the language of archetypes and symbolism. And so when I say mother, no matter where I am in the world, the archetype of the mother is pretty much the same. And we don't have to have the same culture. We don't have to speak the same language. We don't have to have any of the same upbringing to have a similar perspective on what that archetype means to us.
Yeah. And even if you're not familiar with Carl Jung's work and his teachings on archetypes, I think if you're familiar with classical mythology, Greek mythology in any way, Greek is the Eurocentric mythology that we're taught, but each culture has its own set of myths and archetypes. They're all kind of different versions of each other, told through different stories. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's like perfect segue because Joseph Campbell is really like one of the first people who brought that together, right? Who sort of wove that story together that as an anthropologist, looking at all these different cultures from across the world on every different continent and seeing that, tracking them back centuries and centuries, people who had never met each other, who had never had, it was impossible for them to have contact with each other, had very, very similar mythology, had similar stories and about creation or about how like the sky, why the sky was dark at night and like why the forest represented one thing or why mountains represented another thing. It's mysterious. We really don't know why. We have this shared language or this shared understanding as human beings. And the only way that, Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell eventually could come to describe it was as this collective unconscious, this deep knowing that we share as human beings around these symbols or ideas that are innate to humanity. And so Carl Jung kind of started this idea of archetypes. Joseph Campbell ran with it as someone who studied mythology and then went on to create the hero's journey out of his studies of mythology from across the world. And then Carolyn Miss, who is another one of our teachers on the archetypes, she's a spiritual teacher who actually was a medical medium and now talks a lot about sort of the spiritual and the esoteric. She's like super big on archetypes and she's one of my teachers, and she uses the archetypes to understand our sacred contract with our soul. So what do the personal archetypes that we hold within us, not just the archetypes that we use to describe the world, what's actually inside of us and represents our identity, what does that mean? And how does that sort of like play out into the work that we do and our purpose on the planet, basically our soul's purpose?
I think even just in terms of the stories that we tell ourselves, how we can use the archetypes as metaphors for what is liberating us in our personal narratives versus what is imprisoning us and holding us back.
Totally. That's exactly right. I felt like when I did my archetype wheel the first time, I was so scared to have like quote unquote bad archetypes, right? And when I kind of like, pulled the stick out of my butt and got over the fact that like there's no such thing as bad archetypes, they're all neutral, and really was able to like own these parts of myself that I was maybe scared to have that were just innate to me. It was so liberating. It was so freeing to be like, oh yeah, I have the rebel. And actually like the rebel archetype is like my first house. It's what people see in me. And it used to get me in trouble, but I actually can like use it for good. And it's something that I'm happy to sort of have in like my deck in my hand where I can play it whenever I need to.
And how also in popular consciousness, different archetypes evolve over time, like even the rebel or the witch, for example, which has definitely had a revival, since, I don't know, the 50s, 60s,
Totally.
Definitely, in terms of it being reclaimed and how these archetypes move through popular consciousness and pick up or discard different narratives that as a culture we're progressing through.
Yes, that is such a good point. And it's kind of like, they swing from into the shadow from the light, right? Like the witch archetype definitely used to be witch, medicine woman, shaman, right? That's a healer. That's in the light. And then it swings all the way to the left when we have the primitive accumulation, which was the beginning of capitalism. And when Europeans started the witch hunts
Oh
in
shit,
Europe,
women have
and
power?
basically,
Nuh-uh.
exactly. So we're going to call them witches, and we're going to like push that into the shadow, right? And start to burn them at the stake and terrorize women for speaking their voice and their
And
truth,
you're going to get
right?
married and have
witches.
marital sex.
And you're going to be property. Yeah. And then you're not going to have any fun, and it's going to suck. And now we're kind of swinging into the opposite, and well, not into the opposite. Hopefully we'll come maybe back to the center, knowing that there are shadow elements to every single thing out in the world, right? The hero has shadow elements to it, but it also has light elements to it. And so I think our goal with archetypes is that we want them to be balanced and in balance in us. And when they're out of balance, they're in the shadow, right? And they can sort of like take over, and they can act in a way that maybe isn't helpful or useful to us, and in a way that we don't have control over. And when they're in the light, we are like completely owning them. We're using them to our benefit and to the benefit of the world.
It's this understanding of yes and less of a dichotomous view of the world as good and evil. And I think understanding that there is more room for two truths to exist at once, and how that can actually play out to our benefit if we can hold space for those things.
100p. Like, that is exactly right. It's so complicated to have two truths sit next to each other that seem contradictory. But that's life, my dudes. Like, that is being a human. It's not black or white. It isn't like one or the other. It's not binary. The binary doesn't exist in anything. It's a myth. And knowing your archetypes to that point can be really scary. Like, knowing your personal archetypes can be really intimidating, because it asks you to own all the parts of you, even the parts of you that maybe were easier for you to dislike, for you to be like, oh, I hate that part of me, and to shove down, as opposed to saying that is part of me and I have to embrace it, or else I'm not fully myself. And Carolyn Miss has this awesome quote where she says, you know, you can pretend to be something other than who you are, but eventually you'll run out of energy to continue. And that's like so rude and so true. Like, you can pretend to push down these aspects of who you really are, the archetypes that you have within you, but eventually, like, they're going to come out. And that's the same thing with shadow. We can push it down and pretend it doesn't exist and not own it in ourselves. And the longer that we do that, the more powerful that it gets. And really, the more it owns us, and it has control over us.
It's heavy. That's some heavy shit to carry around.
Yeah, bro. It's like when you aren't able to fully be yourself, like, you're always hiding something. You're never comfortable. You're never just being. You're holding, trying to be perfect. So, okay, anyways, we could talk about perfectionism and shadow forever, but let's get into the rules of archetypes, and then what archetypes are and how to draw your archetype wheel, because this stuff is like infinitely fascinating, and it's definitely a journey that takes a while. Like, I'm going to give you some book references at the end of this podcast if you want to go deeper on this. And I really recommend that you do, because archetypes are one of the fucking coolest things I think that you can learn about.
I devote a whole season to archetypes.
Literally, we could.
It's a lot to cover in a 30-minute podcast, which we're aiming for.
Wallis is like holding up her watch, like click. She's like, come on, Pelazon, get to the point. The rules of archetypes are pretty simple. So, first rule, archetypes are universal patterns. They're seen across time and space. If they're not universal, it ain't an archetype, my dude. So just ask yourself, is this something that universally across the board, if I said teacher, people would have basically the same impression of like, oh yeah, a teacher is this. If I said saint, or I said mystic, pretty much people kind of can describe that, even if they didn't have the same upbringing, even if they don't have the same sort of like deep understanding of what that archetype might be, they basically know what it is. The second rule is that there are infinite archetypes, meaning that we're constantly adding archetypes to the human collective unconscious. You know, we didn't have archetypes like the hacker before computers, right? But now that we do, you can totally picture the idea of who a hacker is in your brain as I say that, right? You're probably picturing someone hunched over a computer, typing furiously, maybe with bloodshot eyes, drinking a Red Bull, because that's what we've associated with that archetype at this point. The other archetype that might come up is like the CrossFit guy. Like that's a relatively new archetype, but that's totally an archetype.
I don't know.
Or like the
is
frat
the
bro.
CrossFit guy dead in COVID? We don't know. Is he going to make a powerful resurgence? What will he look like?
I don't know. I'm really hoping there's not a CrossFit renaissance, but I mean, if
Oh
that
no, you can't
sparks
hold
a joy
them down.
for you all.
They're a strong.
They've been prepping for this for years.
The gladiators
with the keto diet and the paleo diet. They're like, bring it. Let's bring it all the way back. Like we got this. So there are infinite archetypes, and we're adding more every day. Another good example of an archetype that we've added recently is the influencer archetype. That's really, really common and really, really recent. And you can probably obviously picture an influencer in your mind right now. And these archetypes also may tend to evolve, as well as said, as they sort of slip into the shadow or fall back into the light, depending on what's going on culturally. Archetypes are also neither good nor bad. This is a really important rule. They are like net neutral, right? And they contain light and they contain shadow elements, but at their core, they're neutral. And this can be kind of hard to understand with like, the murderer archetype or the criminal archetype or the bully archetypes that we have a negative connotation with because we're like, I don't really want to be a murderer. But there are some instances in which you may want to have that murderer archetype in you, right? Or that criminal archetype in you. Imagine if someone breaks into your house and like holds a knife up to your throat or a gun up to your head, and it's either you or them. You might not want to admit it in this moment, but there might be a part of you that would need that archetype in order to save yourself and for that archetype to be in action. And in that case, that could be in the light, right? So they're really neutral at their core. In almost every archetype, we can find positive elements or ways in which acting in that way would be helpful or be useful to us. But there are also ways in which it could be really harmful to us, even our positive archetypes. If we look at caregivers or even, the shadow of the mother archetype could be a little bit of the martyr, or perhaps like the narcissistic mother or the emotionally distant mother. Those are all shadow elements that we might not want to hold within ourselves if we're engaging in that archetype, but they're good to take a look at because they can tell us if the archetypes within us are balanced or out of balance. And when something's out of balance, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you're in trouble. It just means that like we have to bring a little bit more attention to that archetype within us or that area of our lives to bring it back into health.
Yeah, I mean, my murder archetype was definitely activated when I was binging seasons of My Favorite Murder. I was like, whoa, I need to take a pause because if anyone enters my house unannounced, I am ready.
First off, they're dead. And second,
I had to take a step back and be like, you know what, Wallis, maybe you don't need to be activated in this way. Maybe you could simmer down on the murder archetype.
It's so interesting, right? And like, I don't know, there's that idea that women are way more into horror and to true crime than men are. Kind of makes you wonder if it's because that archetype is harder for us to own as like female identifying people in society, right? Because the version of that archetype that we're so used to seeing is like a white guy with a beard who's like super rapey and creepy, because that's what the majority of murderers who end up getting caught are like. So I don't know. There's like so many interesting conversations. I could talk about this shit forever. But the next rule of the archetypes is there are archetypal journeys in addition to personal archetypes. So an archetypal journey is exactly what it sounds like. It's a journey from one archetype into another, or a journey that an archetype will take. For example, the hero's journey is an archetypal journey that the hero takes. And it's when someone evolves from a regular person into a hero and then comes in steps from the ordinary world into the special world. And the hero's journey, Wallis, I'm sure you could speak on this, is something that we see in film and TV and stories all the time. Like Star Wars was completely written based off of the hero's journey, like beat for beat.
Yeah, I have some beef with the hero's journey a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's a very individualistic journey that we love. America loves the American dream, and we love to see that reflected in popular culture. So we want to see that solo quest of, I'm going to go out into the world and beat all the odds. I'm going to face all of these trials and tribulations, but I will succeed against all odds. And I think there's an element of like the boy archetype in the hero versus the idea of the king who blesses and elevates the community and does a little bit more service work. And so I think it's interesting thinking about how often the hero's journey shows up as, you know, we go through our own personal journeys of evolution, and the hero's journey is an important part of that, but it's not the end all be all. It's kind of a phase at the beginning of our lives where we're accumulating knowledge, we're facing obstacles, but there is something that comes after that that's almost more of an evolution where we give back to others and we elevate our communities around us and be of service. And I think it gets a lot of hype, the hero's journey, especially in popular culture, versus like Moana. Moana is trying to say, hey, let's take care of Mother Nature and give back to the earth, because she's the real OG here who's taking care of all of us. And we're part of her.
That's a really excellent point, that the hero's journey tends to focus on male identifying people, often is shown as male identifying people. However, I'm going to push back on the individualistic, because the very end of the hero's journey is that you bring the knowledge that you learned in this other world back to your community. That's the completion of the journey. You're taking the magic, the skill, whatever it is, and you're bringing it back to the ordinary world. So I feel like it may be just that that like doesn't get the play it deserves.
Yes.
Because it's an important element. Because actually that's the point of the quest. The quest isn't for like the hero to go through this coming of age story. It's for them to learn something to change the world and help change the world. It shouldn't be just for like individualistic purposes or selfish purposes. So maybe our beef is just with, popular culture.
Yeah.
and the way that the hero's journey is portrayed.
Yes. No, I agree with that. Just a little fine tuning in popular culture.
No, I like that. I think that's right. I mean, and we hear so much about the hero's journey, but there are so many other archetypal journeys that exist. Like the maiden to mother to crow journey is one that a lot of female identifying people go through, right? The maiden is obviously before you have children. It's when you're young and free and wild. And then when you enter this new world, when you give birth to a child, or you give birth even to a business. And then the crone you're looked upon completely differently in society, in the world, when you're not like of childbearing age anymore. Unfortunately, right now, usually you're looked on really poorly, or you're just forgotten about. But there's so much wisdom that the crone or the sage has. I mean, even the word crone has a negative connotation with it, right? We think of someone who's like old and decrepit and like icky and like kind of witchy and scary and maybe like mean. And that's not necessarily who the crone is. That's just how she's been depicted in the world.
I feel like the crone is slowly getting a little bit more play in popular culture.
I think Helen Mirren actually has a lot to do with that.
And Frankie and Lucy, some sexually liberated crones.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's really cool to see how the archetypes change over time and how we change how we relate to them. And yet, like the root of the archetype doesn't really change. It's us, how society is viewing those archetypes. There's an archetypal journey for the intuitive entrepreneur. There's archetypal journeys for creators, for artists, for rock stars. You can actually map these things out. And that's really helpful and useful in our lives when we're mapping our own archetypes, because we can see what journey we're on and we can see what stage in the journey that we're on. And that can kind of help us predict like, oh, if I'm at this stage of my journey as an entrepreneur or as an artist or as a parent, then I know what's coming next and I can maybe predict what I'm going to need in order to like fulfill that next stage of my journey.
Or if you're immigrating to the US and trying to figure out immigration. It's a twisty, turny ass road. And you don't know what's coming next. Just saying.
There's no archetypal journey for that.
As a current temporary resident alien, it's, you're
one of my favorite aliens, Wallis.
That means a lot.
Okay, and our final rule of the archetypes is that we're born with a set number inside of us.
Ooh.
You're born with your archetypes. They don't change. It's just like your natal chart or like your human design. So you're stuck with them.
My rebel archetype is like, fuck that. 12?
Right,
that's such a small number. I want to be limited.
Yes. And like, this is where I have beef because Carolyn Miss says we only have 12. It's just like the natal chart wheel in astrology. There's 12 houses. There are 12 archetypes we have. And I'm like, I don't know. Do we just have 12? I feel like I have like 14. I mean, like, come on, let's just be a little more flexible. But the point being, whether you're like, yes, it's 12, or maybe you're a little bit more flexible, like Team Holisticism, is that we have a set number inside of us. These do not really change over our lifetime. We can embody infinite types of archetypes, right? Like we can be all over the map, but our core archetypes, who we really are at our center from birth on, is pretty much the same. And that's kind of comforting to know, is like, that's what you're working with, right? And you can try on lots of different masks and lots of costumes because that's effectively what archetypes are. But at your root, you know what to expect of yourself a little bit. Just like an important thing, just in a little asterisk side note, there's a difference between an archetype and a stereotype. A stereotype is a widely held but fixed or oversimplified image or an idea of a particular type or of person or a thing. And that's like just objectively not cool. It's often unfair and untrue, and it's gross. We do not subscribe to stereotypes. Archetypes, however, are something that's really different.
I think if you want to have fun looking at a lot of stereotypes in pop culture, and archetypes, one of the funniest, but also actually extremely useful sites is tvtropes.org.
Oh,
it's such a good site.
Yes, TV Tropes is so good. Yeah, pop culture relies on archetypes so much more often than we might realize. And that's why this probably sounds really familiar to you, even if you've never studied archetypes, because this is really the currency of the stories, of the memes, of the movies, of the TV shows that we watch and have engaged with our entire lives. Even, like the books that we read when we were little kids, like Harry Potter, are chock full of archetypes and archetypal characters and archetypal journeys. So you know a lot more of this than you might realize. So it might sound familiar. So archetypes are cool because, for lots of reasons, because they help you know yourself, because they can help you kind of predict the path that you're on, because they help you understand other people, but also because they help you stop being such a self-centered, narcissistic asshole. Because when you realize that every other person on the planet has gone through something, has gone through an archetypal journey, you never feel alone. Even if you're like, oh my God, no one has had the same experience of me. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. I feel so alone. When you think about archetypes and that they exist and that archetypal journeys have existed for as long as humans have been on the planet, you realize actually, I'm not that original and my problems are not that original. And that can be kind of comforting because if someone else has gotten through this challenging experience, even if it's not exactly the same as yours, the broad strokes are similar, then you can get through it too.
You're like, oh yeah, I've been spending too much time in my head or alone at the computer.
Right. Yeah. And in quarantine, that's even more tempting to do. But life itself is governed by archetypal experiences, and those are common to us all. The archetypal experience of falling in love, of getting your heart broken, of being betrayed, of being seen or recognized by people, right? Of creating a family, of experiencing the death of a parent. All of these things feel so singular when we're going through them. And then when we realize they've happened over and over and over again, and they'll continue to happen, and that's part of being human, it really can bring you some peace Because if we know what archetypes are within us, then we sort of understand the patterns of our foundational beliefs or our drives or what we're motivated by or why we act. Why are some people more primed to be entrepreneurs? Why are some people more primed to want to be parents or mothers? Why are some people just like adventurers, the types of people that want to be like digital nomads forever? Why are other people, the types of people that get married right after high school and settle down and never leave their hometown? How can we relate to each other when we feel so different? And I think when you see people in their archetypes, it helps you have more compassion for them. Just like when I know that my partner's a Virgo and he's like totally type A around organization, I like love him for it as opposed to having it drive me crazy because I can relate it to his archetype or to his astrology. So our archetypal wheel has 12 different archetypes, and there are 4 archetypes that every single person has across the board. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you were born, doesn't matter your birth time, anything like that. Everyone has the same 4 archetypes, and these are called the survival archetypes. They might be placed differently along your archetypal wheel, but you have these 4 archetypes within you. And these 4 archetypes are the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the hustler. And I put an asterisk next to the hustler because Carolyn Myss calls the hustler the prostitute, but that's really dated incorrect language. First off, it should be sex worker. And second, I don't like it. So I call it the hustler because I just don't agree with it. But if you read anything by Carolyn Myss, you might see her use that terminology, just as a heads up. And each of these survival archetypes, again, we all have. So we all have the child archetype. We all have the victim archetype. We all have the saboteur. We all have the hustler within us. Each archetype has a gift. Remember, they're all neutral. And there's something be revealed in all of them. And when they're light, that's generally when they're healthy, and when they're in balance. When they're dark is when some bullshit can come up. The child archetype we all have, even when we're grown-ass adults, and it helps us be light. It brings a sense of playfulness to our lives, and it just balances the seriousness of being a human being and being an adult. When it's light, the child brings out the best in us and the people around us. And there are different sort of incarnations of the child archetype. We have the magical child. Think Harry Potter would be a good example of that. The nature child, like Tarzan or maybe Moana, would be good examples of that.
Shout out to Moana. So much love.
Big ups to Moana, the hero of this
Seriously.
story. The orphan child, like Dorothy could be an example of the orphan child, or Harry Potter could be another good example of that. The perennial child, like Peter Pan. Peter Pan is even an archetype, I'm sure you know a male adult who has Peter Pan syndrome who never wants to grow up. So there are these sort of different versions of the child, the wise child, the spiritual child, like the child that seems to be wise beyond their years, or the divine child, sort of like the sort of innocent and holy child, like who maybe has like an angelic glow about them. So there are all these different types, like incarnations or iterations of the child archetype. So you might not necessarily identify with just the child, period, but you might be like, oh yeah, I'm totally the nature child. Like when I was a little kid, I loved to climb trees and to be out in nature. I personally identify with the orphan child, which is really sad, but I never felt like I fit in with it when I was a little kid. I didn't always feel like I fit in with my family, and that has been part of my identity, and that's okay. It's part of who I am. And another part of, side of that archetype is taking care of yourself and like learning to take care of yourself and being responsible for yourself, even as a small kid. So we all contain that archetype within us as a child archetype. The next core archetype that we have is the victim. And the victim, again, we all have, even if you're like, no, I'm the most self-sufficient, responsible person I know. I don't have the victim in me. You do, my dude. Like we all got it. The victim helps us understand what is worth giving up our own sense of empowerment around. It helps us understand why it's important to take responsibility or notice when we don't take responsibility for things in our lives. And it asks us to examine our personal relationship to power. When do we feel empowered versus when do we feel disempowered? When do we feel like victims to a person or to society or to a situation? And it shines a light on where we maybe can take that back. So when your victim is really flaring up, it's not bad news. It's just information, right? We all have the victim and it can show up in very, very different ways. Wallis, do you have an example of maybe when the victim shows up
Are
in
you
your
trying
life?
to call me out here? Or are you trying to?
I'm not trying to call you out. You don't have to share.
Guess what? That was my victim archetype psych. Trying to blame me for something here? You're trying to send me a message over this podcast?
That's not my problem. I mean,
God, Michelle. Yeah, actually, I think I've struggled with positions of or authority figures since I was a little kid.
You struggle with authority?
Especially what I have viewed as, arbitrary hierarchical situations.
That's the worst. Those are I feel
They
you
are
on
the
that.
worst.
You're just like, this is a dumb fucking rule. Why do we have this rule?
And I think it's been interesting to see, especially over the past few years, how I've used that identification as like, well, I kind of struggle with authority, but how that hasn't empowered me. It's just allowed me to kind of keep a little bit of a victim story in terms of kind of similar to what you were saying, avoiding taking responsibility for my own self-empowerment and placing that on authority figures instead, and then blaming them and being upset with those authority figures.
Wow. That's very astute of you.
So, I'm still working with it. It's a process. We're all being worked on daily. So, your intuition was spot on. You're like, what? I think Wallis has an issue with victimhood. I'm just going to see how she's feeling about it.
No, not at all. The thing is, like, we all have.
I just did it again.
I honestly I was like,
guys, this is a therapy session. I'm sorry that you're tuning in.
But it's totally true. I mean, your share, thanks for bringing that up. Such a good example. I felt the same way. Like working in tech, I was like, there are so many stupid rules here. This is so dumb. Like they're just trying to keep me down and like they hate women. But like I was also choosing that industry. I was also choosing that work. I said yes to those contracts, right? And I stayed at those jobs for a long time. It wasn't like I was there and I figured it out and then I left. And there was something about I needed to sit in that for a while and learn that lesson before I was finally like, actually, I don't have to put up with this bullshit anymore. I can just like, when we examine our relationship to power, I can trust myself to be in power, to wield power responsibly, and to be my own boss, and to maybe like be the boss of other people eventually, and not be a total douchewad like the bosses that I've had in the past, hopefully, crossing my fingers. So the victim is real, and like it comes out in our interpersonal relationships too.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's sneaky, the victim.
It's one that we are really afraid to own because no one wants, it's not sexy to like have victim nature, right? It's like, it's not cool, but it's so informative when it does show up for us because it just, again, reminds us to examine our relationship to power. And that is very important in this day and age when we're talking about exchanging power structures and breaking down the certain power structures. So we've gone over the child, the victim. The third archetype that's a survival archetype that we all have is the saboteur. And the saboteur is what it sounds like. It's the self-sabotage nature that we all have within us. When you get closer to success or to evolution or to change, that saboteur archetype will like sort of pop up on your shoulder and be like, are you sure that you want to do that? Like, why don't you just like, I don't know, keep procrastinating on sending that resume in? Like you're not going to get the job anyways. So like, why bother? What it brings up for us is fear of change. It shines a light on when we're afraid to change and evolve. Change is scary. Our ego and our minds and even our bodies want us to stay the same because we know that we can survive here. Like at least, even if we're miserable, at least we're alive in this moment. If we change and we step into a new possibility or a new world or a new version of ourselves, we're not quite sure that we'll survive, right? Like there's some aspect of us that's like, that's unsafe because I don't know what that will look like. It also asks us to just look at how change can potentially be positive for us. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be that we're afraid of underwire bras or wearing shoes again, right? And how can we look at change as a way that something that's positive and deepens our relationship to being a human or deepens our experience? How can we sort of welcome it with excitement and enthusiasm as opposed to fear or shame or dis-ease? And then the final archetype is the hustler. And this archetype is all about sale and survival. There's this idea that, everyone has a price. If you had to put a price on your business, right, you would sell it for something. You might not sell it for $1 million. You might not sell it for $500 million, but you would have a price at which you would sell that business. Or maybe if you've ever freelanced before, you know that there's a certain number that you won't work for. Like I know that I would never work for someone for less than, $200 an hour. But even like if you are talking to the worst potential client ever, someone who just treats you terribly, who you know you're going to have a bad time with, where you're like, this is absolutely toxic and we've only been on the phone for like 15 seconds, but you probably have a price that you would work with them for, right? It might be like way more than your actual going rate if you're a freelancer, but you probably wouldn't like outright say no to them. They could be the worst person in the world. It could be like, or someone super evil, like a corporation like Amazon or like an oil company. And it might be really hard for you to work for them and your rate might be really, really high, but you would eventually probably have a price at which you would say, okay, I will trade myself for this price. That's the hustler in us. And the hustler represents the sale or negotiation of your integrity or your spirit. We all have a breaking point. And we want to think that we have integrity till the cows come home, but that's just not true. And that's okay. We got to know what we're working with and what our breaking point might be. If we're blissfully ignorant of that, then we're going to be blindsided when and if that ever comes up for us. And the hustler is also really at the root of it. When we're buying and selling, that comes down to our survival. So we need money in order to exist in the world, right? And eventually, like if our survival is up for grabs, then we can be bought. And that is when our integrity potentially can go out the window.
Yeah, I think this archetype is going through a really interesting evolution right now in, just the collective consciousness because of the way that I would say millennials and Gen Z have renegotiated what work looks like and how to make money in so many different ways. So I don't know. It's still in an evolution. I think it's at an interesting place.
Like we are playing with our integrity, with our relationship to work and what we are willing to work for and what we're also like not willing to stand for. And it will be interesting to see this archetype potentially get broken down as we walk farther down the path of like maybe divesting from capitalism as an entire generation of people. So TBD on the hustler and how it will continue to show up. But you can also, if we like take this out of the context of money, you can view the hustler in terms of relationships. Like who do you put up with who maybe like you don't need to be putting up with anymore in order to survive, in order to stay relevant, in order to be important or useful to the world. So those are our 4 archetypes that are in every single person's wheel: the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the hustler. No matter who you are, where you're born, all the things, you have those 4 archetypes. You may have them, scattered throughout your chart. They might all be sitting right next to each other, but you definitely have them. So write those 4 archetypes down. You've definitely got those in your chart. And now we're going to go into some of the archetype families so you can figure out maybe some of your other archetypes that you hold. So as I said, there are infinite archetypes, but we can file most of the archetypes into different categories. The first category would be the sort of like feminine/masculine categories. These are archetypes like the damsel, the king, the Don Juan, the virgin. They're a bit dated, to be totally honest with you, because like we mentioned at the top of this episode, the binary doesn't really exist. So to call something masc versus femme is like, I don't know, feels kind of old. And I'm sure that we could view these archetypes as non-binary archetypes. I wonder like what a non-binary damsel may or may not look like.
Is there a deck that you know of that is specifically kind of non-binary messaging and language? If anyone knows of one, hit us up. I would like to know it.
Yeah. Samara Kasai from Kasai Thrive, who was on our anti-capitalist episode, teaches a class on decolonizing the tarot.
Nice.
And they talk a lot about how it's so important to have tarot decks that represent all people that are not just like, binary genders. And they have some really great recommendations, I think, on their website about tarot decks that are great to use.
Cool.
But I don't know any off the top of my head. Although I will say that the archetype deck is awesome because it doesn't have any human elements to it. So any deck that doesn't really have human beings on it is sort of like innately non-binary. It's not necessarily like humanistic or like inclusive in that way, but it makes you think about it differently. The next archetype family would be the divine family. That's like, saint, goddess, nun, martyr, shaman, missionary, Samaritan, all these sort of like mystical or maybe even like religious archetypes that we think of, which I'm sure you could go on for infinity and beyond around the archetypes that are coming up in the divine and in the rest of the archetype families that I'm going to talk about. And you can actually grab a list of the archetypes if you go to holisticism.com/archetypes. And you can also take an archetype quiz there that we talked about at the top of this episode if you want to learn a little bit more about your personal archetypes. So there's a lot more, but I want to give you some examples and just get your wheel sort of turning in your brain around the different archetype families. So we've got our feminine, masculine, our divine. The next archetype family is the wisdom family. This is the teachers, intellectual, the visionary, the philosopher, the sage, the crone, the big brain people. The next archetype family is the healer archetype. So you can picture caregivers, healers, servant. The slave is another archetype in this that's filed under this category. The creative family would be innovators, entrepreneurs, the artist, the dancer, the shapeshifter, the CEO, the pioneer, the dilettante. That is such an interesting archetype to me that so many people in our generations tend to have, is the dilettante.
100%.
The next archetype family,
self-identifying. I just gotta call it out.
Every time I teach this class, whenever I teach this class on archetypes, I talk about the dilettante, and sometimes people don't know what that is. And it's, someone who likes to dabble in lots of things and will do it like, a 3-day deep dive research on something and then become a mini expert and then never think about it again.
There are pros to this, guys.
There are. I kind of love having the dilettante as an archetype, right? Because it means that you're perennially interested. You're fun at parties because you can totally talk about
great
something.
Dinner party guest.
Exactly. But the downside of the dilettante is that they never go deep on something, right? So they'll do the research, but then they kind of lose interest and master of none.
Okay.
Right?
I don't identify with that. I only identify with the light sides. I'm self-selecting dilettante.
I'm just really fun. Yeah, so that's the creative. And, the creative, I love the creative archetype family because it's not what you would think. It's not just the starving artist or the filmmaker or the director. It's also entrepreneur, CEO, pioneer. These are all archetypes that have this sort of spark in them of seeing a new world, right? That are creating and seeing a new world, envisioning it. And I love that about this archetype family. The next archetype family is the action archetype. This is your typical heroes, your rebels, your advocates and allies. The detective archetype lives here. The social justice warrior, that's a relatively recent archetype that lives within the action archetype family. And then finally, we've kind of got the wild card family, which is everything that can't be sort of thrown into these other archetype families lives here. And this is kind of where other archetypes that are beginning to pop up, as we said, influencer or the hacker could show up here. Some other examples might be the femme fatale, which we often see in film and TV, energy vampire, which has gotten really popular over the last couple of years, but definitely the vampire craze was something that happened in the 1800s with Dracula, when Dracula was published. The sacred fool or the fool. Well, many of the archetypes you actually see in tarot decks. So if you're ever trying to place someone, you can think about the archetypes that come up in the tarot deck, like the priestess and the hierophant and the magician and the fool is a good example that's in the wild card family. The storyteller, that's an archetype that we see a lot these days on podcasts, on TikTok, on Instagram. And then the alchemist, one of my favorite archetypes that's actually in our archetype wheel for the North Node. So those are the archetype families. There are infinite archetypes, remember, and we can file many of these archetypes under the archetype families. It just makes it a little bit easier to navigate. What I recommend is like going through and looking at these archetypes and seeing what sort of sticks out to you, either as really triggering or dysregulating, meaning you're like, oh, I don't want to be that one, or oh, I don't like that one, or is really like lovely and admirable to you. And just go through and like highlight them or just make a note of what's popping to you, or even how you would describe yourself, what archetypes other people, archetypal words people use to describe you. And then you're going to cast your wheel. And there are lots of different ways to cast your wheel. You can be super witchy about it. You can use an archetype deck like Carolyn Miss's archetype deck or Kim Cran's archetype deck. That's the unofficial Holisticism team deck. We all have
Shout
a version
out
of
to Kim
that.
Cran's.
She would be a dream guest to have on the podcast. Kim Cran's, if you're out there, we're super fans. You also don't need to buy anything in order to do this. You can grab, start to write down the archetypes that you feel like you identify with, narrow them down to roughly 12 to 15, write them on index cards, and then you're going to cast your wheel. So if you've got a deck that you're working with, you don't necessarily need to narrow it down. You can if you'd like to keep it really mystical. You don't have to. I like to narrow it down because I know myself really well. And I usually do, when I've done this, I've done it with my partner. And it's been really helpful to do it with someone else who sees outside of you, who you really are. So we pulled our 12 archetype cards each, and then you cast them in your wheel, and you'll cast them according to the same way that the houses of astrology work. So, the first house represents the self, and that's our ascendant. And as we go through every single house, it represents a different aspect of our lives. So go ahead and do a quick Google, figure out what the 12 houses of astrology look like. We have something on the Holisticism website if you want more info. And if you go to this holisticism.com/archetypes. I'll put some info up there in case you're curious about the 12 houses of astrology and the 12 archetype houses. But you'll basically cast each archetype that you identify with in all of these houses, I should say. If that feels a little bit too rigid to you, that's totally fine. I recommend just writing down the archetypes that you identify with and that have come up in your life from the dark to the light, and keeping them on your phone or even like on a Post-it note next to your desk. And just noting that they're there. I have mine written down on my phone, and I'll notice when they come up for me. My rebel comes up a lot because it lives in my first house, but I also have the shapeshifter archetype in my own wheel, which means that I'm changing a lot depending on like what people want of me. And sometimes that can be really good because I am great at pleasing and helping other people. And sometimes that's something I need to watch and just be in awareness of, am I being true to myself? Am I being really honest and authentic here? Or am I like trying to be something that other people want me to be? Wallis, when was the last time you cast your wheel?
Oof, it was a while ago. I think it was like 4 years ago. I got to do it again.
Oh my gosh.
I guess you have to have a follow-up, and I've got to admit where I was right, where I was maybe a little bit off, where my victim's at, where my dilettante is at.
Yeah, I would say this is definitely like a process that is not like one and done. It's kind of evolving because you might identify, especially when we first get started, like we only want to be the good things, right? Nobody wants to have the bully in their chart. Nobody wants to have even like the victim in their chart, right? We'll very like conveniently avoid those 4 survival archetypes because they're not that sexy, but they're really important to who we are and how we show up. And perhaps if we cast them in a wheel, where maybe we're more likely to be in victim nature, where we're more likely to sabotage ourselves. Maybe if your victim is in the 7th house of work, like maybe that means that when in your work, your victim is like more likely to rear its head. And that's important for you to know and understand. You can be a mystical person and not have the mystic archetype. You can be a witch. You can be super magical and not have the magician or the witch in your archetype wheel. That's fine. You can have the CEO or the entrepreneur in your wheel and never start your own business. This doesn't have to be so literal. And just because you start your own business, you don't have to have the entrepreneur or the CEO in your wheel. I don't. So yeah, there's a lot more flexibility, and it behooves you to be honest with yourself when you're casting your wheel, as opposed to trying to like paint yourself in the best light you possibly can.
Yeah, especially after your Saturn return, you're like, oh, JK, this I thought I was this person. Guess I'm not.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, the Saturn return will really teach you a lot about who you are. Saturn return, a big breakup, maybe like a quarantine year. I feel like honestly everyone is primed to do this exercise for themselves.
Let us know.
Yeah. And Eve,
cast your wheel.
Yeah, hit us
Let
up.
us know what you get. We're here for you. We'll start an archetype support group. I mean, that's what we are actually.
Yeah, but that's really who we are. We talk about the archetypes and our personal archetypes a lot in the North Node, which is our private members community, because we actually can use the archetypes, for ourselves, of course, but also for our ideal clients, for our business, for our relationships. We can pull the archetypal wheel of pretty much anything that we want to. We talk about this a lot more in IWA and in the North Node, but pulling the wheel of who your ideal client is can be so helpful when you're trying to figure out just how to talk to them. To Wallis's point earlier, just knowing, even if you have one archetype of who you're talking to and who that person is and how they show up in the world, can really just like guide your path as you're either trying to start a business, or if you're trying to be more intuitive in the way that you start your business. Casting your archetype wheel for your ideal client can be a good first step. And finally, if you want to dive deeper into the archetypes, because I know this episode was really long, but we really are just like really just dancing across the surface here. There's so much more. There's so much more to dive into. Go to holisticism.com/archetypes. There's going to be an archetypes mega list there, but we also created a quiz for you to figure out which intuitive sort of entrepreneur archetype you are and where you're at in your own archetypal journey. It's really fun. So go check it out. And if you want to learn more about archetypes, I so strongly recommend it. Honestly, you can learn more just by reading mythology, reading spiritual books, spiritual or religious texts, and by watching movies. So if you want to have a sort of like loose education, go do that. Permission to binge Netflix.
Or just check out your most sent gifts and memes.
Yeah, there we go.
There's a lot of archetypes present in the gifts and the memes that are being sent around.
It's true. It's true. Yes. Or like pop onto Reddit and see what you're attracted to. There's a million other ways to learn about archetypes, but some of my favorite books are The King, the Warrior, the Magician, and the Lover by Maureen Gillette, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert E. Johnson, Carolyn Miss's book, Sacred Contracts, obviously, and her book, Archetypes, which are both fantastic, and The Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Honestly, I'm going to get kicked out of wellness, but I don't love this book.
I mean, there are some gems in there, but you have to find them.
Yo, it's so long. It's so
There's
long,
some
this
gems.
book.
They're hidden.
But some people love it. Like, they're like, this is my Bible. It's not for me. Sorry. Don't divorce me, or do, like, whatever. But it is really interesting. And I will say that. And Clarissa Estes is an amazing Jungian and archetypal expert. So definitely just go read anything. I think actually she's written a lot of other amazing books around creativity that are way more interesting. But Women Who Run with Wolves, if you're into it, go check it out. It talks about mythology and mostly like female identifying archetypes that come up in the world across cultures. But archetypes are like infinitely fascinating and exciting, and I just love them so much. And I think they make this world just like easier to understand and grasp, and more fun too.
I think we have to end this episode by pulling a card.
Oh, shit. I don't have any cards. Okay. Hold on.
Hold
okay.
on,
You pull a
sec.
card. Great. This is very rare form for me to not have a card.
We have the Eternal Child.
Oh, such a good
Yeah,
one.
tell me your thoughts.
It's one of our survival archetypes. It reminds us like of the joy and the beauty and the just like awe that is in the world. If you think about how a child like experiences something for the first time, when you're able to see the world through a child's eyes as a parent or a teacher or a guide, it reminds you of like the magic that exists, and that we are Like this world is incredible and we take so much of it for granted. And it's so like heartwarming.
From this book, the eternal child is connected to the timeless, ageless, and infinite aspects of life. It is radiant and fearless and seeks joy above all else and at any cost. It struggles being bound to an aging body with physical limitations in a world that demands attention to detail and logistics. The eternal child wants to nix all rules and responsibilities and go beyond what others say is possible. It wants to return with plenty of friends to the land of the free, where divine wine and creativity pour from the earth and sky. We all want a sip from the well of eternal youth, and this makes the eternal child naturally popular, perhaps even famous. The eternal child glimmers. It reminds us of what is possible, what is magical about this precious life.
That's so sweet.
I'll just read, when in light, it's joyful, playful, accepts all magic. When in dark, it's addicted, selfish, adrift, and burnt out.
A toddler that needs a nap. Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, that was great. Gosh, it's such a good. I mean, we are not sponsored by Kim Crans, although like call us
Hit
if
us
you
up.
call us Kim Crans. Like either way, call us Kim Crans if you're listening. This deck is like so beautiful and the imagery is amazing. And if you want to learn the archetypes, it's a really helpful tool. But you don't necessarily need to buy it in order to cast your archetype wheel. Again, this is something you can do for free on your own. And you can go learn more at holisticism.com/archetypes. But that's pretty much it for today. We went super long, but hopefully you learned a little bit about archetypes that you didn't know before. And I can't wait to hear from you what archetypes are coming up in your wheel. What I consistently hear from people, because most people have never done this before, is that they understand themselves and their shadow elements in such a different way once they cast their wheel. Like they feel seen and heard and they actually really understand themselves. So I'm excited for everyone who's listening out there to try this and to let us know what's in your wheel. Our phone number is in the show notes, and I'm going to include some of the links to the reading that I recommended there. And again, if you want to learn more about your archetypes, go take our archetype quiz. It's super fun, and get that mega list of archetypes if you are casting your list on your own at holisticism.com/archetypes. All right. With that, we're going to jump into our Witch of the Week.
And we're live here with the team at Holisticism. I'm Wallis. I'm the content editor, and we're here to do Witch of the Week. And I believe, Janelle, it is your turn this week.
Yeah, can I start off by saying, though, that I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but I definitely watched the movie Witches on HBO Max the other night.
I feel like not good.
I had to, well, one, I will say I had to check and make sure it wasn't PG-13 because Jesus, it was creepy, actually, very creepy. And then the second part was, I was really actually upset with how they portrayed witches. I felt like the fact that they're perpetuating witches as these like women, heinous, ugly, that eat children. Like we're past that. It's 2020.
Yeah.
We know what the real deal. Let's not teach the new generation like this fake shit.
Justice for witches, man.
Justice for witches. Let's change the story for witches. It's time. That being said, my witch of the week, I am actually going to do Misha Green. So she is the writer of the teleplay for Lovecraft Country. She also was the showrunner for Underground. She also was a staff writer on Sons of Anarchy, which I loved that show as well.
Did not know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Amazing. And she has actually a very long-running career, still so young. But Lovecraft Country is my jam. If you have not seen it, if you haven't heard about it, go find a trailer, go find somebody to talk to about it. They'll have no idea how to explain it to you, but you'll love it all the same.
It is so good. Wait, how would you describe it, Janelle?
So I would describe it as a magic, sci-fi, horror,
comedy,
historical, dramedy specifically for Black culture.
Yeah.
It like this to me, what it's like the way that it's moving the dial for how we see ourselves on screen is just phenomenal. And I know like I grew up with a bunch of sci-fi nerds in my house. My dad was a huge sci-fi nerd, my brother, the comic books and everything. And so to go into a show and you see Black people who are into science, who are figuring out equations and who are, talking about history and like really, and then exploring it to the extreme of witchcraft, that is just, we don't see that like ever. So for me, this show has really set a new standard. And Misha Green, what she's done with the actors, what she's done with the writing, how she's translated the original story, because it was a book, it's just phenomenal. She truly is one to continue to watch and look out for.
Yeah, I really respect Misha. She also graduated from NYU Tisch School of the Arts. Yeah.
3 out of 4 people on our team went to NYU Tisch. So
yeah.
Sorry, Wallis, not to make you the odd one out. But
all good. Y'all Americans are obsessed with your schools. just gonna put it out there.
Thais is literally wearing an NYU shirt right now.
Yeah. But I love Misha. She, like, after Underground, because she never got a lot of credit for that. I feel like John Legend and whoever else the other person was got, like, a lot of the credit. But she was a writer on that show as well. Like, it was her baby. So I'm super happy that Lovecraft Country is back. And I'm excited. I haven't watched it yet. Everyone is telling me to. So
yeah,
I'm ready for that.
You are in for a treat, and you can binge it now because the season's over. So that honestly usually is the best way I like to watch the shows.
It is definitely binge worthy. Ethan and I watched it, like we were counting. He's not a TV person because he likes to be rebellious in that way. Like I think that he seriously says he doesn't like TV just because everyone else likes TV. And
I do that sometimes.
And we're like counting down until Sunday when we could watch it. It was truly like appointment television. It's so good. Thais, I'll give you my HBO Max login if you don't have one so you can watch the whole thing.
I have my friend's trial, so yeah.
Yes, artist living.
The HBO released a really good accompanying podcast with it, and they break down the writer's room for each episode. It's really good. Highly recommend.
Agreed. I've only listened to one of those episodes, but the first episode that I listened to, I did really enjoy, and I keep hearing that they're really good as the season goes along. So yeah, I mean, just everything. They're firing on all cylinders on that show, truly. And I do want to tell really quickly just a quick anecdotal story that I heard. Oh, this is really quick. Misha Green and Journey Smollett did not care for each other on Underground. They notoriously had a really bad relationship. They would not be allowed to be on set together. And when it came time for Misha Green to figure out, or for them to cast the part for Letty in Lovecraft Country, she said in her heart that Journey Smollett was the character, but she didn't want to actually hire her for it because of their relationship. And for months and months and months, they auditioned a bunch of women. Journey actually came in audition. Journey said she knew the role was made for her. She waited for months by the phone and couldn't understand why they weren't calling her. And Misha fought it. And finally, when they were like at their wits' end, she said, fine, bring in Journey. Let's have Journey do it. They called Journey up and she got the role. And now they're like close and like they seem like they're best friends, which is really cool.
Wow.
But I mean, really, truly just a testament to, if you got it, you got it. If it's for you, it's for you. And like nobody can really stand in the way of that, even if they don't like you. And then they got the power.
Oh my gosh.
They don't really get the power.
No one can steal what's yours.
I follow both of them on Instagram, and I saw that Journey said that they were twin flames, which is totally a mystical, like magical element. And twin flames, I mean, also totally up for debate. Like that is a contentious term in the wellness space. But like the way that she described it and the way that I've learned it is that this is someone who you cannot divorce. Like they cause you the most strife and the most love and the most expansion in your life. And sometimes there's a shit ton of pain, but you are like destined to be in each other's lives. You cannot separate yourselves. And that seems like that's their relationship. And that's a lot.
That is a lot. It's intense. Twin flame energy is really intense. I saw that too. That's really funny that you pointed that out.
Yeah, I love that. Also the twin flame in a creative sense too. I feel like I've always thought of it in a partnership, like sexual energy, but in a creative force and a creative duo. That's super interesting.
That's a really interesting concept to me, because the idea of a twin flame in creativity, where if you are causing me strife, you are not to be a part of my creativity at all. I don't care if we were meant to be together. You causing me strife? Like, what?
Get out of here.
Hey, you not my man. Like, come on.
Right,
This ain't
right.
worth this. Sis. Like, chill out. But that's just me.
Yeah, I like the idea of like decentering romance as the most important relationship, right? Like, what if I just read this cool article about like, what if our friendships were the most important relationships in our lives? Our true soulmates were our friends, not the person we got married to and had children with. How would that change our relationships to the world and to each other? It's interesting to think about.
That is interesting to think about.
Mic drop for the next.
Yeah, so let me contemplate on that for the rest of the day.
Well, that was an awesome witch to select. Thank you so much, Janelle. We'll drop more info about Misha and Lovecraft Country in the show notes.
Go and watch it.
Go watch.
All right. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for listening to the 12th House, and we'll see you next week. Bye.